Okay, we're live. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Louise Adler. I'm chair of Canyon Democrats, and I'll be sort of hosting the beginning of this meeting, and then we'll turn it over to our speaker. I want to let you know that we're live on YouTube and on Zoom, so that's why you've been muted. The first thing we always do at our meetings is say the Pledge of Allegiance. And we've tried saying it together and it sounds pretty funny because, of course, it doesn't sync up with all our different computers. So I'll say it for us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And of course, we always start our meeting by remembering the people who have died due to COVID, even now when the numbers are going down. And we hope all of our members, of course, are wearing your mask. I have now received both my shots and I am wearing my mask when I am out. So hope all of you do that as well. Want to just remind you that March is Women's History Month, and there are a lot of interesting programs being put on by women's groups around the county. So take advantage of that. And I'm sure you've been seeing the news articles. And also the Democratic Party of Orange County, the DPOC, is having a wonderful event that focuses on younger women and women of color. So if you would be interested in that, you can get more information on the DPOC's website, which is orangecountydemocrats.com. We're in Zoom format, and I think I saw that there were some new folks joining us tonight that have not been on before. So I just wanted to let you know that everything you do on Zoom, when you have your camera on and your microphone on, is public so people can see and hear you. If you have questions or about what's going on in the meeting or questions for our speaker, please type those in the chat and people keep an eye on that for us and let us know what those questions are. If they can answer them directly in the chat, they will, or if we need to bring it up orally. So that's what you need to know about Zoom. This is our agenda for the night. What's different tonight, which has not happened in quite a while, is there is no new business from the board of directors to be voted on tonight. So I don't know of any new business that anybody wants to bring up tonight. But if you happen to have a motion that you want to make, you would have to do it in the chat. And hopefully Rachel or someone else can take a look at the chat and see if anything comes up there. So we'll give you just a moment to think about that while you look at the agenda. For those of you that are new, let me say a little bit about how we do our voting and our agenda. Is we use a consent list because it is hard to vote on Zoom. So we don't want to have to do it many times. So what we do is we put everything on the consent calendar, the agenda, the meeting minutes, any new business if we have it, and also the motion to adjourn. And we take one vote and we get it out of the way. When we have really substantial things on as new business, of course, any member can ask to take something off of the consent list, and then we will have more time to talk about it. But if nobody asks for it to be taken off the consent list, we just vote on it all at once. And that clears that away, and then we go on to our speakers. So can somebody look at the chat and tell me if any member has brought up new business?
There's no new business that I see, only a request for you to zoom in, but I will put a link in the chat in just a moment to the agenda. Hold on.
Yeah, the agenda was attached to the email that went out so you could click on it in advance of the meeting and look at it, and also the minutes. We're trying to be as respectful as we can to allow people to participate, but we have this problem with the pandemic and we're stuck with Zoom. So, okay, since there's no new business, we're ready to take a vote on the consent list, which is the agenda, the meeting minutes, the new business, and the motion to adjourn. So I need a motion from one of the board members. Marty,
I moved. And Heather seconded, and it's already being voted on.
Okay, good. I don't get to vote, so I don't see the poll because I'm a co-host. Okay, thank you for voting. How is it looking, Rachel?
With 67% of the vote in, it's 100% for, 35 yes votes and 0 no votes.
Okay, so I think we're safe to move on. Thank you very much for voting. Now, if there's people who have not been to one of our meetings before and you would like to say hello to everybody and tell us who you are and where you live and why you came, we'd love to hear from you. We'll have to have Rachel unmute you. How can we do that, Rachel? Can they raise their hand? Is there a way to do it?
Yeah, if they want to raise their hand in the chat, then I can unmute them if they want to talk.
Okay.
Otherwise,
or you can introduce yourself in the chat if you don't want to actually talk. So
Correct.
It's up to you. So do we have anybody who wants to talk to us about who you are and why you came? There were some new people, but I know it's intimidating to do it in this format. So we'll keep trying. And when we get back to our regular meetings, it's a lot of fun to hear from folks that are
Maria,
new.
I'm sorry, I can't see everybody's. If you're doing it in person, then I can't see everybody's physical hand. So please do let me know in the chat. And I believe Maria is new. Welcome, Maria.
Hi. I live in Casa del Sol. I'm one of the people that are keeping our group together, our Democrats together at Casa del Sol. Thank you so much for this great meeting. I really enjoyed your last meeting. My main concern right now is how we're going to protect our governor. What are we doing to help him out? And I'd like to know what ideas we have and how we can all help. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, I love that question, Maria. Let's see if anybody else wants to say something, and then I can say a word or two about that.
How about Debbie?
Hi, my name's Debbie Salahi, and I know some of you that I've worked with in the past. I'm a member of ANDC, and I came because I'm really interested in your speaker tonight.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And how about Linda?
Hi, my name is Linda Fisher. I've lived in the area since 1980, as a matter of fact. Came from UCLA, spent a career in HR with local companies, aerospace companies. I'm Irish. My kids are named Mike and Pat. I tell you that because tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, thank you.
And I joined the group because after January 6th and kind of the Republican response to that, I said, I've got to go find my people. So here I am.
Thank you.
And how about Sandra?
My name is Sandra Boyle. I live in Santa Ana. I was invited here by UNAOC, by Joy Adams. So yeah, I'm here because I'm a member of UNAOC, and she told me about the speaker today, and because I run a nonprofit for the homeless, so she suggested I attend the program. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Let me just say a word about the recall. You've probably seen Gavin Newsom on TV more. He's gearing up to defend his position. What I heard him say today on the news was that they do expect the recall to have enough signatures. And as soon as we hear anything from the DPOC or from the Newsom campaign, we will be letting you know. I'm sure we're going to be doing postcards, telephone calls, dropping stuff off at doors, all the things that we've done in the past. And we will be going 150% in to support our governor. So I'm glad the question came up, and we will be ready. Okay, one of the things that's going to come up in the future is we have a very special program planned for Earth Day this year, which is the theme is Restore Our Earth. And we have speakers on eradication of toxic chemicals and plastics recycling on April 23rd at 7 p.m. And you'll be seeing information about this in the online newsletter so that you can sign up for it and get your place, because I'm sure it's going to fill up pretty quickly. So I'm real excited about this, and I want to thank Andrea and Annie and who else worked on it? Ann and Andy and Annie, all the A's worked on it. Okay, one of the things that's coming up and is happening is redistricting. In normal years, say 10 years ago, when Donald Trump wasn't in the White House and we did the census would be done and everything would be very routine. But it all went sort of sideways because Donald Trump, and we had the pandemic and we had Donald Trump. So the census was held up for a time. And the Census Bureau wanted more time, and then Trump told them they couldn't have it. So there's some argument about whether the numbers are complete or not, and they're in the process of trying to figure that out at this point. But the normal process is that we have a census. The Constitution requires it every 10 years. And then we redistribute the districts. And then those people get elected in new districts. And we go through this process every 10 years. And the reason we go through it is that the idea behind the House of Representatives in particular was that each representative in the House of Representatives would have about an equal number of people that they're representing. So people move. And for a while, California, when I was young, was growing like gangbusters. So every 10 years, we were adding more and more Congress people. It stayed stable the last 10-year census. But this year, it's likely that we will lose a congressional seat from California. It will migrate to some other state, like perhaps Texas, that's been growing more quickly than we have. So that's a problem for us. Because when you redraw those seats, you have the potential of dumping two congresspersons in the same district, and then they have to run against each other or one quits. Going in the wrong direction here. So the steps in the process were the census. And you remember last fall, we were all very anxious about the census. We were calling people, we were checking up to make sure everybody responded to the census. And the reason we did that is because we were worried about losing a congressional seat out of California. So the next step would be what's called reapportionment, when the federal government looks at where all the people live and divvies up the seats in the House of Representatives. That's called reapportionment. Okay. And then the next step is to redraw the boundaries between the districts so that you end up, hopefully, for all the different kinds of districts with an equal number or somewhat equal number of people in each district. Part of the debate that Trump was trying to make was he wanted us to just count citizens. But the problem is that the Constitution says people, it doesn't say citizens, okay? So that's the step. And so what would normally be happening right now is we would be hearing about reapportionment, and very soon after this spring, we will be doing redistricting, but that's not going to happen as fast as it normally does, okay? So this is the process that's going to happen. It happens across all of these various levels of government, but you can't start until you have the census numbers, okay? In California, we have what's called the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, and it draws the boundaries for congressional seats, state senate, state assembly, and the Board of Equalization. Then in each county, different counties have different processes. Each city has to redraw lines. School districts may have to redraw lines. And then there's water districts, community college districts, and so on. Generally, the rule is that you want, for example, to have assembly districts be in one county. And you want lines to be similar. So congressional lines and state senate lines line up, okay? So it takes a lot of work to make all of that happen. And it's going to be kind of rushed this year because normally that process would have already started. But as you can see from this timeline, the census data isn't expected to reach the state of California until September 30th. And then the census data goes to the commission, and then the commission starts holding public input for the state level positions. And then all the cities and the counties and all of them start the same process locally. So next fall is going to be a little crazy with reapportionment and redistricting. And so, you know, we could see, for example, the lines between Katie Porter and Mike Levin change. We could maybe see Mike Levin all the way in San Diego County, or Katie Porter moving north. We just don't know. Okay, so Annie, would you go ahead and introduce Dr. Snow?
I can't, okay, I couldn't unmute myself. Before I tell you about tonight's wonderful program, I wanted to let you know about what we're going to have in the April meeting. We're very, very pleased to present to you UCI law professor Michelle Goodwin. Maybe some of you have heard her presentations to other groups. She's really very well known and just a very, very excellent presenter. And she's going to talk about COVID-19 and the limits of government action, and legal and political concerns about balancing government authority during a pandemic and national health crisis. So that's going to be a wonderful program in April. Tonight, we are just so honored to have UCI Distinguished Professor of Sociology, Dr. David Snow. Dr. Snow is a renowned researcher, and I just wanted to let you know a little bit more about his background. His teaching and research interests include social protest and movement, socioeconomic marginality with an emphasis on homelessness and poverty, and various aspects of social psychology. He's the author or co-author of 10 books and 100 articles and chapters on these various areas of research. He's the recipient of numerous Lifetime Achievement Awards, and he led the recent study on the cost of homelessness in Orange County in collaboration with OC United Way and Jamboree Housing. Dr. Snow, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. We are really honored. And the mic, I'm turning over to you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you and to share some of what I know about homelessness. Let me bring up some slides here. Okay, yes, it's a pleasure to join you. I've been studying homelessness really since the mid-1980s, which was kind of the beginning of the current wave of homelessness that has continued now 20 years into the current century. The questions I want to address tonight are these five. I'm not sure if we get through all of them, but we'll begin by tussling with the question of what is homelessness? Who do we count as being homeless? Next, who are the homeless? What are their demographic and biographic characteristics? Then we'll talk a bit about the causes of homelessness, why some folks and not others. And I want to say a few things about the challenges of living on the streets. You know, how do they make out literally and make do and survive? And then a bit about the cost of homelessness that we found. So let's turn to the first question, who counts as homelessness? I have here listed array of factors. The one at the top is the one that's used by the federal government to cut actually the top three and sometimes the fourth. But basically, people are living in places not intended for human habitation. That's pretty well understood, not in this country, but throughout the world. Then there are those living in shelters, sleeping in their vehicles, and those who have been evicted from their homes, discharged from institutions, or fleeing domestic violence. The U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department uses these four factors in defining homelessness. For our research, we broadened it a little bit to also include people who were in doubling up and living in transitional and supportive housing. The reason we expanded the conception was the cost study was trying to get at the question, what is the cost of living on the streets in comparison to different categories of housing for the homeless? So we need to gather data on both those living in the streets and those in different categories of housing. Then you can go on down to those doubling up, living in transitional or supportive housing, living in substandard housing, refugees and disaster emergency camps, itinerant groups, and so on. You know, worldwide, the population is 7.7 billion. About 2 billion plus of the worldwide population would be classified as homeless. That proportion of the world's population is estimated to grow more rapidly than the total world population. If it's estimated to be 10 billion by the middle of the century, the incidence of homelessness worldwide would probably be around 4 billion. So it's an ongoing problem, and as they continue to get more serious with environmental problems, climate change and so forth, that push people out of homes near coastlines, particularly in third world and the global south. the way we did the study, and the data comes from, as I said, we needed data on people living in the streets and different housing complexes, but we wanted data on kind of as much of the institutional organizational sector of Orange County as we could get. As you know, there are 34 municipalities. We tried to secure data with questionnaires from city governments, from hospitals with ERs. We did a sample of non-governmental agencies and then of the course of the county. So this kind of gave us the institutional cost. But then we wanted to drill down some. And this is where we did our interview studies. We interviewed close to 300 homeless living on the streets and shelters, or those who had recently moved into transitional housing, rapid housing, or what's called permanent supportive housing, which is housing with wraparound health care. We figured if we knew on the left side, the institutional side, for example, what's the average cost in the county of an emergency room visit, then we were talking to homeless person, Sam, and we learned he had 24 emergency room visits during the past 6 months. And we know what that cost is. We can really get a detailed accounting of, and not only what it costs, but how it's linked to other medical issues that person has into their overall lifestyle. So this is how we gathered the data, and the data I present comes primarily from this study. In terms of kind of demographic characteristics, a few highlighted ones here. We found that 90% of them were born, of those we studied, were born in the US. I mean, this cuts against the stereotype that, well, you know, disproportionate share of the homeless are people that have really come across the border, are not US citizens. In fact, far more Orange County residents were not born in the county or born in the country than most of the homeless we've interviewed. We also found that most of them have lived in Orange County. 68% lived in the county 10 years or longer. What's in parentheses has to do with the 2019 point in time count in the county, which showed that 92% had lived for some time in Orange County and 73% had work in the county at some time. As always the case, the predominant number are male. We found 12% veterans, the point in time only 5%. Whites is a plurality, but Latinos made up 30% of our sample and Blacks 15%. What's noteworthy there is the 30% Latino is about proportional with the 32% of Orange County population that's Latinx. The 15% Black is overrepresentation of about the 2% of Orange County that is Black. Not surprisingly, wherever you look in whatever metropolitan area in the country, you will find that Black Americans are highly overrepresented among the homeless. Another interesting finding is 67% live alone, you know, which is to say that 2/3 are disconnected, which creates a problem in itself. There's nobody to fall back on. Only 6% married, 17% with children, and most of those are with their mothers in some kind of housing arrangement. Around 20% have not completed high school. You might guess it would be more, but that's at least 4 times what the percent would be for Orange County as a whole, and even close to the national high school completion rate. Nearly 50% last worked at a job that paid a regular paycheck 5 years ago, and where's the, what I want to move to is the 45% indicated they were fair or poor health. That is based on a standardized question used in health surveys across the country. If you ask most Americans that question, only a much smaller percent indicate that I think it's nationally only 9% of American adults say they're in fair or poor health. And even those Americans, adults living in poverty, only 22% report that they're in fair or poor health. So 45% in fair or poor health suggests right there that there's one coin, two sides with respect to homelessness, one for housing, other is health, and they both go together. Here, I just want to mention when you look at who lives alone, the low percent marriage with children, these are what in social science and we would call social capital deficits. I mean, there's very different ways you can look at populations and how they compare to each other. And one is in terms of social capital. And, traditionally, those with higher social capital scores do better in terms of life satisfaction, income, educational level, and so on. Human capital deficits are what the economists talk about. And here, the homeless have considerable human capital deficits in terms of educational level and work history. And then in terms of health deficits, both the incident of depression and the high percentage who say they're in fair or poor health. So the causes of homelessness, we looked at there are really two factors here that intersect. People argue, well, it's this or that. It's two sets of factors, structural antecedents and personal biographic factors. And so our interviews, this is kind of the breakdown in terms of the structural, 40% indicating securing or retaining jobs with sustainable wages was a major factor. 36% indicated finding affordable housing. The other ones are biographic vulnerabilities, familial issues, drug, alcohol, mental illness, physical health, and recent release from prison or jail. Just to accent the structural factors and their importance. Now, this is a little dated, but the median rent, how it increased 24% between 2000 and 2014, while median renter income declined 10%. And it's therein that lies the key factor contributing to homelessness. When that gap grows larger between the cost of rent, the cost of housing, and the availability of resources to access that cost, that's where you're going to find an increase in homelessness. Another way to look at this, again, to show how these different factors intersect. So these is for homeless women, and the largest cluster of causes, the key factors, again, lack of housing affordability and job loss. It's not to say, as you can see on the right there, that other factors don't come into play, but those are the two driving factors in this cluster. A second cluster is probably not surprising, domestic violence, which is for 21%, but we'll say a bit more about that. And then only 5% where drugs and alcohol are dominant for women. It's a little different for men, but not much, with cluster one at 57%. So that's highlights the lack of affordable housing and job loss. You have 22% where you have the intersection of family issues, drugs, and health, and 21% where re-entry from jail or prison, drugs, and mental health. But what this shows you is how these factors intersect, but for different groups where you have one or two factors that are dominant. I mentioned something about abuse, and here you can see with red male, orange female, and the yellow the total for physical abuse, sexual abuse, and physical and sexual abuse. And if you combine the total for all three of them, you're up over 30% that were abused by a member of a household during childhood, which is clearly a traumatic event, and we would argue has implications for vulnerability to something like homelessness. You can see it even more dramatically here. For women, 40% experience physical or sexual abuse during childhood by a household member. 24% experienced domestic violence, the reason for their homelessness. And 58% of the women we met reported both experiencing physical and or sexual abuse during childhood and domestic violence as the reason for homelessness. And that percentage, 58, just underscores the really quite intimate connection between abuse, sexual and violent physical abuse for women in homelessness. And there are other factors here by childhood. Again, we're talking about that render people vulnerable. Had a parent or other adult household member who had an alcohol or drug problem when growing up, 42% overall. Was a parent or immediate family member spent a night homeless, 14%. 25% living with non-parental relatives responsible for their care, foster parents, an orphanage, and 6% in juvenile correction facilities. So, you know, it's not like the homeless, the majority of homeless are on the same playing field as most of us when it comes time, when, if at all, they confront certain kind of obstacles to housing and employment. Let me see here. I'm going to skip over this for time. Here, victimization among the homeless. And you can ask yourself about your own personal experience. Overall, 29% verbally harassed around homeless, 32% among women, you know, hit, basically assaulted, 11% for women, 8% overall, had something stolen from them while they were homeless, 37% overall, and had something taken for them under the threat of violence around homeless. And there the percentage isn't that high, but 4% overall, 5% men. I don't know. I've never had actually any of these things happen to me, other than maybe when I was a kid and kids harass each other, but certainly not as an adult. What about their contacts with the criminal justice system? So kind of annually for the past year, the time's ticketed. And here, what does ticketed mean? It doesn't necessarily mean you're driving a car. It means for maybe hanging out in public places. It could mean for drinking an alcoholic beverage in a public place. It could mean for sleeping on a bench. It could mean for hanging out in a park, particularly at night. So you have 4.76%, about 5% among men. Then there's times appeared in court. So if they get ticketed, then they're supposed to go to homeless court. You can see women show up a little more than men, which is maybe not surprising, even though they're ticketed much less. In terms of actual arrests, average of just a little over 1%, 1 time for men, and then times in number of contacts in a cell, jail, or prison. I mean, again, in comparison to the average citizen, a much more frequent contact, much more frequent interaction with the criminal justice system. It's what I guess what it's primarily what you would call a status offense. That is, offenses that are registered as criminal by virtue of being a certain status. In this case, person who doesn't have a domicile resident. And what this kind of leads to is a vicious cycle. So you're homeless on the street, you need to meet basic public needs. Those behaviors are criminalized. I mean, I'm sure all of us have been caught in a situation where we're in a almost state of panic looking for a restroom. Well, that's every day for most of the homeless. And that behavior, if they relieve themselves publicly in some fashion, that's criminalized. They'll get a ticket or arrested. If they get a ticket, they have to go to homeless court. They can't pay the fines because of their dire economic situation. So they may go to jail for a while and back out on the street, and the cycle continues. Now, how do they survive? I mean, you know, they buy cigarettes, some buy beer, food, and so on. So these are the very sources of income or material survival. Again, men in red, women in orange, and the total is yellow. And you can see the primary item for material subsistence is food stamps. And then we have what's shadow work. And that's what basically it's you could call it a kind of work, but it's in the shadow of regular work. So panhandling would be a example of shadow work. Collecting cans or cardboard or bottles to sell would be shadow work. Selling drugs would be kind of shadow work. There's some prostitution kind of shadow work. This is the second most frequent means, and particularly for those folks living on the street. Then 27% overall, some employment. Then depending on disabilities from Social Security, alimony, general assistance, and Social Security. More of them would probably, of the older ones, would probably are probably eligible for Social Security, but you know, because of not having an address, may not have applied for it or did not know how to apply for it. Let me give you an example of a woman I talked with. Actually met her at the Newport Beach Transit Center, a bus transit center. It was on a Saturday morning, and she was sitting there. It's an African-American woman, and asked if I could interview her until her bus came. And she had come from Anaheim. I asked her if where she slept last night. She slept on a bench in Anaheim. She said she has a bench where she sleeps there regularly. And I mentioned her in relation to Social Security because her primary source of income is Social Security, $1,000 a month. But clearly not enough to get into housing. But what she does, she'll use the bench, and then she come the weekends, she'll get on the bus and maybe go to the beach communities or whatever, depending on the weather, and find a inexpensive motel, stay for 2 nights, try to get a good night's sleep, shower, wash her clothes, and then back on the road on Monday morning on the bus. She also knows places she can get a decent dinner relatively inexpensively. So that's kind of how she makes do. Now, what does this add up to in terms of dollars and cents? Well, you can kind of see those who, I think the numbers, not so much the percentage. I mean, for worked in the last 30 days, you can see there the primary, most of those who worked in the last 30 days, either live in transitional housing or rapid rehousing, in which employment is one of the conditions for living there. And so you see for rapid rehousing in particular is housing for families, mainly mother and children, who have recently fallen on hard times, and the objective is to get them back on their feet. Their rent is subsidized, but they have to pay for some of it, and they receive counseling and support in terms of getting back on their feet. But they're the largest earners. If you go down to the median total earnings from job and other sources, it's $500 for people living on the street versus $19.58 for those in rapid housing. The whole point here is you look across this, wherever one lives, even in rapid rehousing where most money is earned, based on that income alone, in Orange County, one is hard pressed to find rental housing that they can afford. I wanted to turn to health factors and also just talk about COVID for a minute, but just in general, again, the relationship between health, this isn't surprising, but it underscores it. The red is you have 0 serious health conditions, orange is 1 or 2, yellow 3 or more. And you can see, just looking at the serious health conditions, how it more than doubles the longer you're on the street. Again, that's not hardly surprising. Living on the street hardly facilitates healthful living. So, I mean, again, and we'll see this in a minute, that also relates heavily to the cost of homelessness. Just a few things on COVID. This past year in Orange County, there were 330 street deaths, which are 40% increase over 2019. And I had seen where that's not, the total number in Orange County is not much different than the total deaths for 2020 among the homeless in New York City, which may be kind of hard to believe. The kind of causes that you would expect, the greatest number are natural and you know, heart, kidney problems, liver damage, cancer. All of these are, you know, many of these individuals have comorbidities. And that's true among the chronic homelessness, because that's part of the definition of being chronically homeless. And that's reflected in the number of those who have died of natural causes. 86 of the 330 drug, alcohol, 13 suicide. This comes from the coroner's office, 5 homicide, 5 due to COVID, and 54 pending or difficult to qualify. For those who live in shelters, there have been 417 positive cases with only 1 death. So how does COVID relate to this? Excuse me. It's more indirect than direct. And the indirect thing, just think, just as all kind of public facilities were closed through all the domicile during the past year, restrooms, public restroom, park restrooms, all closed. And so these are places that the homeless would access. Again, you know, good hygiene on the streets, a problem to begin with. The hygienic problem is exacerbated living on the streets during COVID. So they become more vulnerable to other kind of illnesses, or whatever condition they have is worsened by living on the streets during COVID, which I guess you could construe as an indirect impact. The county also, not just Orange County, but LA County, other counties, the governor's office, the state implemented this program called Project Room Key, which is now kind of being phased out. But what it did had different kinds of shelter arrangements for older homeless, 60 and up. One kind of arrangement for those who have tested positively, another one for those if they had it, and another one for just people with comorbidity and who are older, who are vulnerable. And I think that helped in part in reducing the incidence of COVID and particularly COVID deaths. Let me just turn here to the cost. We found, so this was for 2015-16, 300 million, which we consider a conservative estimate. The leading sector was the municipalities. We did have, of the 34, we had 21 reporting, who, in other words, gave us the data we requested, and 13 based on population size that we imputed the cost. The hospitals, 76 million, the county 62, and housing agencies 34. This, well, we'll see. I don't have included on this some of it would be in the county, but the correctional law enforcement agencies. This gives you another view of the three cost sectors. I've been emphasizing or mentioned several times the importance of healthcare. The biggest single cost cluster is healthcare, followed by the housing cluster and law enforcement. The law enforcement, though, is a very conservative estimate because we didn't have estimates for probation, for example, or parole in relation to the homeless. So we would anticipate that would be somewhat higher. Now, what are the costs versus the chronic and non-chronic? The chronic homeless is those folks who have been on the street for a year or more and have comorbidities of all sorts of things. The average cost we found for a chronically homeless person in the county was $100,759. For the non-chronic, 42. Bear in mind, the non-chronic haven't been on the street as long. Most of the chronic have been on the street 3 years or more. The non-chronic don't have all these comorbidities. And so their cost goes down because they're not accessing the healthcare system at the same level. So let's formulate a hypothesis here. Prior to, actually, during George W. Bush's presidency, he moved us forward quite a bit in terms of thinking about how best to combat homelessness. Prior to that, the assumption was that, well, before you can get people in housing, you have to mute their or deal with their substance problems if they have them, mental health problems, and so on. Then people said, no, that's not working. And you know what? If you put people in housing, whatever the condition they have, they're going to get better, or the odds of them getting better are going to be greater. So the argument here is that put people in permanent housing and with support services. And the two primary kinds of permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. And the hypotheses is hospital visits will decline, law enforcement contacts will decline, and time on the street will decline. So what do we find? For the non-chronic homeless, the cost are $42,000, as we indicated. If you put them in housing with support services like rapid rehousing, it declines to around $10,000 a year, considerable savings. Now we're talking about services. We're not talking about the cost for the construction of the housing, but for the services, nonetheless, a considerable savings. For the chronic homeless, from 100,759 to 51,000. And again, this is what's called permanent supportive housing. And this is provides wraparound health services. So, you know, if it's mental health, if it's substance, whatever, there's monitoring of the drugs they need. I mean, one of the big problems on the street for actually drugs for medical purposes is that, you know, they get lost or they forget to take them and this sort of thing. And all of that is monitored when you have permanent supportive housing with, which includes health care. So kind of the cost saving summary for services, as those who are chronically homeless, 50% lower per person per year. And what we found for the chronic homeless, when they're housed, they have 78% fewer ambulance rides, 100% fewer tickets, and almost 100% fewer arrests. So, you know, what I suggested as a hypothesis with respect to the housing first model seems to bear out. And if you want to look at the most costly 10% of chronic homeless, the upper decile, it costs $439,787 per person a year. Compare that to putting that person into permanent supportive housing at $55,000. One gentleman I interviewed, been on the streets in Orange County for 17 years. He was thrown into the streets by a stepfather. When his mother died, he lived with the mother and stepfather. When the mother died, the stepfather found a girlfriend and didn't want him in the house. He had some disabilities. He threw him out. I met him, he was in a wheelchair. And you name the physical disability, and however long the list is, he had had most of them. And just in the past 6 months, he had been to RE-HOU more than 12 times by emergency transport. That's 12 emergency room visits. And he had also had 5 to 6 inpatient visits. And one of the things we found about the homeless in the hospital is that their average stay was about 10 days. Comparison to most of us in the hospital, maybe 3 days. And part of the problem is finding a place for them when it's time to get out. And of course, that means the longer you're in, the cost is just going to accelerate dramatically. So what are some of the major takeaways? I think one way to think about homelessness, it's a situation in which people find themselves rather than a characteristic of the persons. We so often, when it comes to social issues, we individualize it and forget about the social structural factors that increase the probabilities that certain individuals are going to find themselves in certain kinds of situations. The point is, homelessness is a social condition rather than a social type. The primary cause, again, is the gap between the cost of rental housing, the availability living wages to access that housing. It doesn't mean there are not other contributors. Mental illness, drugs and alcohol, healthcare, any of the biographic factors, including being a victim of abuse. But it's that gap between the cost of housing and resources to access that housing that is the primary driver. So again, it's the interaction of the structural factors and the personal biographic. One way to think about it is we've all played the game of musical chairs. Ask yourself, I mean, what accounts for a chair being removed and what determines who is left standing? That's a question you can ask yourself about homelessness. Think of the chairs being removed as the housing. So a decline in availability of rent and who's left standing. Well, then you have to go to the various kinds of demographic and biographical factors that render some people more vulnerable than others. And that's where you get the interaction of the two. And while there are interesting differences between homeless men and women, there are also many similarities. Let me also say I've conducted research comparing homelessness in 4 global cities: Paris, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Tokyo, Japan, and Los Angeles. And one of the things I was struck with was that life on the street, being homeless on the street, has a certain characteristic to it, a certain rhythm that transcends cultural differences. I mean, part of it's we live in a global society. If you look at the makeshift tent arrangements or housing arrangements by the homeless in Sao Paulo or Tokyo or Paris or LA, one of the things you see that's used for roof covering is the blue construction plastic that's used around the world. You know, so globalization, just as it kind of mutes to a certain extent, not all the way, but to a certain extent, cultural differences, it does it pretty dramatically with respect to the homeless. Fifth, what the study shows, and these findings have been demonstrated elsewhere, that the cost of homelessness decreases markedly with the provision of housing. So I guess, and also that the issues that people find troublesome and that kind of stimulate the NIMBY reaction to housing for the homeless, so issues like, public appearance, it could be elimination in public, public intoxication or inebriety, whatever. All these issues decline when housing is provided. So given all of that, my question for you and for others is, why not housing now? And I'll leave it at that in case you have any questions.
Dr. Snow, thank you so much for that presentation. And yes, there are questions in the chat. And one is from Alan Fenning. How do you define doubling up for counting people as homeless?
Well, the HUD doesn't define that as homelessness, but I would define that as homelessness. Look at the New York Times. I don't know if some of you saw it. Let's see, it was a few weeks ago. It was at the end of January, had a op-ed, actually the main editorial It was titled, "How Many Americans Are Homeless?" The answer, no one knows. And it was a criticism of the way the homelessness is counted. And that's primarily driven by HUD and its narrow definition. And I mention that because if you look at it from the standpoint of the Department of Education, in Orange County, for example, we see estimates of over 100,000 children being homeless. Now, you know, at the universities. So homelessness gets counted. There's the McKinney-Vento Act, which was based on a broader definition of homelessness. And so kids that are living in marginal housing and in you know, families that are doubling up and so on would be counted as homeless. The point is my first slide showed a number of factors that can be used to define homelessness, but depending where you look, only some of them are used. So in part, it's a political issue too. You know, California, former President Trump generated a fuss about the high incidence of homelessness in the county. The estimated number of homeless in the county based on how it's counted, its flaws notwithstanding, is, you know, close to, it's 550,000 or something like that. California, it's 121,000 or 151,000, excuse me. So a disproportionate number of California residents. And of course, you can expand that or lower that depending on the criteria you use to define homelessness. And that's part of the point of that New York Times editorial, is that it's, you know, it's hard to know exactly. But what I laid out at that beginning slide are the range of factors that can be used. And as I said, the problem will continue. What did I hear the other day? Right now, in terms of rental housing in the country, 1 out of 5 renters is in arrears. And we've had an eviction moratorium. And when that is eliminated, what's going to happen? Are some of these people going to have to double up? Some will become homeless, not all of them, but some will, given the conventional definition, but some will end up doubling up. And I don't know how many of you saw the movie Nomadland. I mean, again, one can say, well, they're doing that by choice, but that's true to a certain extent. But all of those folks appeared to be living by very meager means. And so folks like that would not be counted either.
Thank you, Dr. Snow. Actually, we have quite a few questions. Ted Pearl would like to know, what do you think about the issue of using Fairview Hospital to provide housing for the homeless, and in particular, Katrina Foley's position on that issue?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's been discussed for some time, and there's been resistance to that. Again, when we talk about using places for homeless, we have to, if it's going to work, we have to ask which homeless, with what conditions, and what kind of housing arrangements. If it's just at the traditional shelter, that the traditional shelter kind of operates oftentimes like a quasi-prison, where you're either locked in or you're locked out for the day. There is a new shelter that just recently opened in the county in Santa Ana. It's called the Yale Transitional Center, and it seems to be an advance of kind. Following COVID protocols, it could house up to 400 homeless, 450, non-COVID protocol around 1,000. But some of the interesting differences is that the residents can come and go within a 72-hour period. So, I mean, it's not like they're locked down. Part of the question is, you know, developing facilities that not only help individuals who have various health conditions, mental health conditions, come to grips with those issues, but also to treat them humanely. And shelters haven't always done this. This new shelter seems to be a step in that direction. So I think the use of Fairview, I think it could be promising, but again, it's how it's used, and if it's for homeless with different kind of conditions, how that is organized and handled so it's done humanely.
Thank you, Dr. Snow. Here's another question from Rachel Lowe. Which elected positions do you think have the largest impact on solving many of the issues you outlined?
Which elected? Say that again. Whose positions? You mean some elected official or mine?
I'll just jump in since it was my question. It was just, I'm just trying to ask if you know, you wanted to advocate for homeless issues, which elected position do you think is the most impactful, like a city council person or a county supervisor?
Well, the city council person, I mean, look at, they're all necessary because, and it's just taking Orange County, for example. I've been on the Newport Beach ad hoc committee for homelessness. And there have been two council people on it, the mayor and one other, or sometimes three, along with a number of other people that were selected. And there have been some good advances made. The city's moving forward well beyond where it was when we began. So you have clearly some council members that are sympathetic to that. And part of the reason is because, you know, local residents are concerned about the homeless for various kinds of reasons. I mean, you know, you go to these, when the council meetings are open and you have the public section, you've probably heard some of them in your respective municipalities when you go in a council meeting, but people can say some outlandish things. But, you know, the council members associated with this subcommittee haven't been driven by those things so much as finding reasonable solutions. So I think it's important at that level. Then you go to the supervisor level, and that's a, you know, that's a broader perspective. So the county was the main driver in terms of this Yale transitional center. Now, I don't know if some of you read the Voice of OC, but the editor had a critical comment on the county, not so much the county opening that, but closing several other facilities at the same time. Although this new facility is a much better facility than some of the other ones that were closed. I think these problems have to be attacked at a number of levels of, you know, cities, counties, states working together. That may be idealistic, but you know, you can try to do it from the top down. But if you have people at the top with policies for those, I mean, in different municipalities, those policies may work some better and some rather than others. And so that's where I think, you know, at the local municipal level, you have to have input there from a mayor's office and the city council. So I don't really think it's one or the other.
Thank you, Dr. Snow. We're running out of time. There's some more questions that we can get to, but we won't be able to get to all of them. But let's just see how far we can go. Here's another question for you. Are there any specific programs currently in Orange County that are doing a good job of assisting those who have been chronically homeless and getting them housed?
Yes, there's been an initiative going on for a couple of years, you know, driven in part by the cost study. I mean, you know, you can make arguments for doing something with respect to a problem on humanitarian grounds. On the other hand, if you can show that there's a cost benefit to it, all of a sudden it attracts attention that other types of persuasion may not. And so the cost study did that to a certain extent. It wasn't the only factor, but it contributed to it. And so there's been a big push to develop more permanent supportive housing, which is targeted for the chronically homeless. My understanding that, I don't know, maybe it was by 22, they wanted to have 1,700 units of permanent supportive housing across the county. And the idea was to allocate them across the county municipalities based on population size. And of course, there's been some headway that's been made. Certainly there are more permanent supportive housing units. Newport Beach is in the process of selecting a contractor to build a permanent supportive housing unit. Probably the contractor best known in Orange County is Jamboree Housing, that has a good number of units. And the interesting thing is, if you drive by these units, they look like apartments that most of us would be fine with living in. And you don't find people hanging out outside or loitering outside of them. They don't need to. They have their own kitchenette. They have a small living room, and they have their own bedroom and their own bathroom. There's no need to go out and hang out in the streets. So yes, that's going on, but as most of you would guess, there's also been a NIMBY response to that. And I think that in part is where, again, at the local level, not just the city council, but other agencies and nonprofits can step in and try to play an important role. The other thing is that, you know, you just can't mandate that this is going to be done in this city, in this place, without bringing local residents into discussion. I mean, for certain, if you say, look, this is what we're going to do without entertaining some of the views of local residents, you know there's going to be kickback. So, you know, it has to be a process. There is a process in place. These things never move quite as rapidly as you would hope, but there has been headway made, and I'm hopeful that there continue to be headway made with respect to the construction of more permanent supportive housing units for the chronically homeless.
Thank you, Dr. Snow. We have time for one more question. And how do these problems compare to other counties? We often hear that Orange County is too expensive. And so is the answer to some of these problems for people to move to more affordable counties?
Well, you mean for the homeless?
To move, for the homeless to move.
Yeah. Well, that's a tough one. How do you get people to move? You just can't. I mean, there are those folks that, well, let's put them on a bus and take them someplace and dump them. It's less expensive to live here than it is in Orange County. I remember early on at the Newport Beach Council meeting, somebody said, well, many of these folks, guys have worked construction. There's a lot of open spaces and wood up in the Northwest. Why don't we just move them up there? Well, again, historically, nothing good comes of, I guess, what you would call population transfer in terms of dealing with social problems or certain kind of targeted individuals. So, I mean, hey, much better is, some of these people are disconnected from their family. Today at the meeting with the Newport Beach Ad Hoc Committee, one of the staff members that focuses solely on homelessness was telling us about the effort was made. An 88-year-old woman who had been living in a car in Newport Beach for 4 years. And so with the support of a police officer who's assigned solely to homelessness and this other staff person in city government, they found her family in Texas and made an arrangement for her to return to Texas, but she didn't want to leave her car behind. So a brother flew out and they drove the car back together to Texas, where she is now. So she's been moved, but reconnected with family, and she has her car, which, basically was her home. So for her, it was the same way we all feel about our home. And it's with her. My point is, if we work at these issues, and they're not easy, but the dividends are much greater if you can find a more reasonable, humane solution to these problems.
Dr. Snow, thank you so much. There were some questions that we didn't get to. So if anybody would like to email them to me, and perhaps I can get with Dr. Snow and ask him if he might have time to respond to them. That was a wonderful presentation. And I know we all learned things that we didn't know before. So thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you all, and continue to do your hard work for the Democrats, the Democratic Party.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good to have you. Thank you.
Take care.
I'm so glad. That was a wonderful presentation, Annie. I really appreciated every minute of it. A couple things before we start our committee reports. I found out just before the meeting, somebody told me that California Senate Bill 264 that Dave Min is sponsoring, the bill to get the gun shows and the ghost guns out of the fairgrounds, passed out of committee. So if you were one of the people who wrote letters or made calls to get that passed out of committee, thank you very much. That worked. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to try sharing my screen again and see what happens. There we go. Okay, so we're going to have our committee reports. And our first committee, of course, is our community outreach. And Ann Owen is going to tell us about becoming a champion, a housing champion advocate. So Ann, do you want, Rachel, will you unmute Ann?
I am. I'm unmuted.
Go ahead, Ann.
So, well, this is perfect. After Dr. Snow's talk tonight, I hope you're all asking yourselves, what can I do to make some kind of a difference? And I have a lot for you to do. So there's actually two things happening locally on low income housing. One is in Laguna Hills Mall that I've been sending people requests.
Do you want me to show this
Yeah, would you
slide
show
on that, Ann?
Right, yeah.
There, whoa, I went too far.
Okay, oops, there we go. I'm asking people to write letters to the city council saying they support low-income housing. I've sent out letters to people in Lake Forest and some of the focus groups. You don't have to live in Laguna Hills because you can just say, I shop there. I've lived here. I work there. I eat in restaurants there. And put in your feelings about, and I put a little sample letter too about what you can do. And then tonight, before this meeting, I just got an email that basically says that Mission Viejo is having a meeting on their housing element. Circle this on your calendar, please, if you live in Mission Viejo, on March 31st at 6 p.m. The housing element is what addresses all this issue. And so if you have something to say, that is your time to say it. So I'll be sending out an email to people, especially in Mission Viejo, to tell how you can respond via an email to that also. So now you're probably saying, well, what am I supposed to say? So if we can go back to the other slide. If you go to our housing advocacy meeting this Friday at 12, we will tell you what to say. This is a follow-up to the Housing 101 that we had a couple weeks ago, and I think we had over 30 people that attended, and I thank those who do. But you do not have to have attended that in order to attend this class. This is showing how you as an individual can make a difference with your local city council. It gives you hints, things to look for, things to say, ways to be an advocate to support this desperately needed housing that Dr. Snow was just talking about. So if you sign up for that on Friday, it will give you all the hints and tricks in order to do that. And we have a sign up list. We have a sign up, actually we have one that was sent out this weekend. It's also on our website. Just go to canyondems.org and you can sign up right there. So I thank you all for your energy. We used to have I don't know if Vivian's on here. I feel like I need my bullhorn that Vivian used to have.
Oh, really quick, there's a question from Kathy Palmer. Is there a deadline for the Laguna Hills Mall project letters?
Well, right now we're saying ASAP to get your letter out there as soon as you can. Their developer, Merlauren Greer, is going to be presenting at their city council, but probably not until the end of April. We're going to be asking people also to respond at that time, but we want them to know we are watching them and that there's a lot of people interested in this topic that support it. And they can't just brush it under the rug and say there's not a need. So yes, if you can do your email now, it doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be fancy. It just kind of says, we're concerned about this. We know you have RENA numbers that are over 900. Their RENA numbers are for very low and low cost housing. And this is a perfect place to build it since there's a lot of land there. And you can just contact me at annowens@cox.net if you have questions. Thank you.
Great, Ann. You're doing such good work. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and we still have to follow up on what's going on with the development near the Lake Forest post office too. Make sure that actually happens since it's been approved.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Anything else? Nope. Okay, moving on. So Judy Fike is going to talk to us about two efforts that the field team is undertaking. So Rachel, will you unmute Judy?
Hi, everybody. We have two projects going on right now. The first is contacting voters and thanking them for voting in the November election. And there's information on our website that will tell you what you can do. Sarah Burt is the dynamic person who is coordinating all of that. So hopefully we can get a few more people contacting voters. And then the second is we have decided to try to expand our outreach to Spanish-speaking voters. And I've been able to corral 4 people who have volunteered to help. They will be making phone calls, and if necessary, they will be able to talk to the homeowners in Spanish. And I would love to involve more people than just the 4. We're starting with just 1 precinct in Lake Forest. And depending upon how that goes, we would really like to expand our contact to people in Lake Forest at large, and then maybe reach out to other communities. So if you are a Spanish speaker, you can get a hold of me at fielddirector@canyondems.com. I am planning on doing a Zoom meeting to introduce folks to that process. And then we will probably by the second week in April, we'll be beginning the phone calls.
And it's fielddirector@canyondems.org.
.org. Oops, .org. I'm new on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And we need people to sign up to handwrite those postcards. So all the postcard writers, we're back in business. Okay, so next is fundraising. Marty. Rachel, will you unmute?
I'm here.
Thanks,
already
Marty.
done. Thank you, Louise. We are going to, our big fundraiser for this month is getting ourselves back in balance with the vernal equinox, and we're going to do that with the help of wine. We have a wonderful sommelier who's going to be giving us an educational session. He's chosen 2 Italian wines. He's a specialist in Italian wines. And so the cost is $65 per household, includes the 2 full bottles of wine, not little pretend airline bottles, but full-size bottle of wine, 1 red and 1 white. You'll also get a chance ticket for special additional bottles of wine. We have 8 bottles of wine that we're going to be raffling off. And so your ticket to the wine tasting event on Zoom gets you 1 ticket for that raffle. Also, if you want to up your chances, you can purchase additional tickets for $5 each. The important thing is this event is this Saturday at 4 o'clock, and we need to make our order tomorrow. So by noon tomorrow, not 12:01, but noon tomorrow, you must have your tickets. So nobody's watching. You could get on your phone right now and go to the Canyon Dems website and sign up. And I hope you will. That's our big fundraiser for this month. And if it goes well, who knows, we might make it something that we do on a regular basis. You know, who doesn't like tasting wine? Maybe we could do beer or bourbon or something, who knows? For people who don't drink wine. So it's really important that you get your tickets by noon tomorrow, no later. The other thing that's good news is we have 46 sustaining donors. We have a sustaining donor program where if you're able to give a little bit more than your regular membership cost, you can do that. And we have 46 sustaining donors, and so far they've raised in the aggregate $3,030 this month as of Monday. So if you have a little bit of extra, you want to send in an extra check or go on Act Blue and give an extra $5 a month, or however you want to do it, we would appreciate that. We're really trying to get as much money as we can because we may have to work hard on keeping our governor. And certainly in, less than a year, we're going to be gearing up again for our, for Katie and for Mike and for all of the people that we are sending to Congress, plus all of our local elections. And there are a lot of those that are going to be happening. We want to be able to give as much money as we possibly can to those candidates. The other thing is I want you to check the website. We have a wonderful swag program. We have shirts and jewelry and masks and doggy scarves and water bottles and all kinds of wonderful stuff that you can buy with the Canyon Dems logo or with just some fun fabrics on the masks. And we also have Biden-Harris merch there as well. So while you're getting your ticket on the website for your wine tasting, you can also stop by where it says shopping and look at the links for the items that we have for sale. And that's fundraising for today. Melora,
Thanks,
do you have anything to add?
The only thing that I have to add is if you have purchased a ticket already, or you can also, if you can't make the wine tasting, you can also just buy raffle tickets for the, we're not calling it a wine wall right now, we're calling it a wine wagon. Because we don't have a wall, but you can do that. And we will be sending out information tomorrow afternoon, early evening, about the wine pickup, and all that information will be in an email to everybody tomorrow. So stay tuned and we will get to you. So, but that's it. Good job, Marty.
Thanks, Melora. Okay, so moving along to membership, Ann Owens.
Mute. Okay, I want to thank all of you that have joined. As you can see, our total number of members, 321, actually it's closer to about 325 or 6, because in the last day or so since this chart was made, we've had more people join. So we are coming right along. And I want to thank you all for joining, and please tell your friends and family and anyone else that we are open.
Great. And somebody told me, Anne, that we have a member who doesn't live in California anymore.
Well, we did have a family move to Michigan, but I think she told me they were going to join the local party there.
I see. Okay, well, we'll take members anywhere.
Exactly.
We're thrilled to have you. And this, if you want to go on our website, it's easy. You can, if you're a new member or you're renewing an existing membership, you just click, and down at the bottom of that page is information about sustaining members as well. Okay. So Andrea has a great new program, Andy Alexander, political action. Go ahead, Andrea. I hope Rachel unmutes you.
Hi, I'm Andrea Alexander, and I'm trying to get an internship program started in our club, and I'm looking for high school students. So if you know of a student that would be interested in serving as an intern, I would appreciate it if you could email me at action. What is my email on this? action@canyondems.org. And I can talk to you about the internship program and what we will be offering that student. And obviously, high school students in the Saddleback district are required to have community service credits to graduate. And this is a good opportunity to get those. And also this would look good on a college application or a resume. So please contact me if you know of a student that might be interested in this. Thank you.
Yeah, so really put the word out. This is a great opportunity. I'm very excited about this. So hopefully with our wide network, we will be able to find a really bright group of students maybe to help us. Thank you, Andy.
Am I doing political action?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to let everyone know that we now have, potentially we have, all of our focus group leads filled. RSM is Patty Evil. Laguna Hills is Christine Roy. Thank you, Christine. I think she's on the Zoom tonight. So thank you, Christine, for stepping up to do that. Mission Viejo is Walt Lawson. And I believe the unincorporated areas for now are being handled by Gary Gephardt and Ken Johnson. And Lake Forest is myself. If anyone is out there and they want to participate in any of these city focus groups, please contact me at action@canyondems.org, and I'll make sure that that focus group gets your name and contact information. We're building our teams and we're taking action with our cities. We're working on things like homelessness, community choice energy, and eradication of toxic chemicals from our green areas, playgrounds, and so forth. And the Earth Day celebration that we're having on April 23rd will focus on that issue about toxic chemicals. We have a wonderful speaker, so please try and come to that. Anyway, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy. We're really excited about the community-based focus groups for each of the cities and the unincorporated areas, because it's allowing us to have people in the city talking to the city council about the issues that our members think are important. So this is really very exciting. Thank you very much, Andy.
You're very welcome.
Okay, Ken, our loyal treasurer, could not be here tonight because good news is that Major League Baseball is getting busy, and he works on the company that does a lot of their infrastructure, electronic infrastructure, and he had to have a meeting tonight for work. So he asked me to go over the treasurer's report, which you can see we began the month of February at over $11,000 total. And then we had deposits from memberships, which Anne has been bird dogging, has a group of people calling, and we really appreciate their calls to people to renew their membership. We got in over close to 2,000 in February, and then sustaining donations were 840. And then we had a little fundraising event for Valentine's Day. We didn't have any merchandise sales, so we have to get on the stick and get that information out there and put it front and center in our newsletters. And then we had operating expenses of $180. And to be honest with you, I can't remember exactly what that was, but it was probably, some of it was mailing reports to the various FEC and FPPC that we have to do. And then we purchased new club postcards, which you saw Judy Fike talk about, because we're writing the messages on the back of those new postcards. So, oops, I'm sorry. We ended the month with $13,657.10. And since then, we have received money for the wine tasting, but we also got rebates of money that we had paid to the Murray Center, and also for the 4th of July event in Mission Viejo. Since they don't know when the Murray Center is going to reopen, they've sent back the money we had on deposit with them, and that's brought our balance up currently to $15,122. I actually got on the phone today and called the Murray Center, and the answer is that the city manager will look at the reports from the state and the CDC and decide when it's safe to open the Murray Center, but there's no projection available as to when that might be. And the lady I talked to sounded almost surprised that I was calling. So I think we're going to be on Zoom for a while. That's what it looks like. But as soon as we know more information about that, we will share it. So the good news is our finances are in great shape, and we're pleased with how things are going. And the issue about what we're going to have to do to support Gavin Newsom's reelection makes the fundraising and the membership dues all the more important this year, because we had not budgeted for that. And it's going to be something we have to attend to. So anything you can do will be very helpful. So what we'd like to do now, because that is the end of the formal part of our meeting, but we'd like everybody